Thank you very much for the invitation to join this webinar. And I'm looking forward to discuss some of the work we did recently on 3 individual difference variables on how to deal with laughter and ridicule. And in particular, we were interested in a series of studies to see how those that fear being laughed at, the Gelotophobes, those that enjoy being laughed at, the Gelotophiles, and those that enjoy laughing at others, the Katagelasticists, how they behave in romantic relationships. So one of the questions, for example, was we are interested in seeing whether there are, let's say, assortative preferences. So if people select their partners based on perceived similarity in how to deal with laughter, and whether this also relates to relationship satisfaction. I assume that most of you will already have heard about these 3 dispositions, so I will keep this very brief. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to ask, and I'm happy to respond. So when I joined the lab in Zurich, one of the first things we did was, and it was quite an endeavor, getting the first article out took us some time, and some journals. We based on observations from a clinician, there was the idea that there would be people who do not perceive laughter as something positive or enjoyable, but rather see laughter as something that is used to put either themselves or others down. So any type of laughing is laughing at rather than laughing with. And this is also expressed in a somewhat almost paranoid sensitivity toward the laughter of others. So imagine a situation in which you pass by some strangers and they start laughing. Those high in gelotophobia would be sure that those people would be laughing at him or her, or if they would be in a restaurant, for example, then, and if they hear someone laughing a few tables away, they would also be absolutely sure that those people have just laughed at him or her. By now, I think there are more than 100 articles out there on gelotophobia and also partially on the others. So there is quite robust evidence gathered since 2008, when the first article came out, that this really can predict important real life outcomes. And what I will show you is some data on how this, on whether this is important in relationships as well. So then we have gelotophilia, the joy in being laughed at. Think of a person that would very openly talk about his or her recent failures and mishaps. A person that would say, well, there is nothing too embarrassing that ever happened to me, be it in relation to, I don't know, something embarrassing that happened during sex or during a presentation or whatever. They would enjoy telling those stories. And if they notice that others start laughing, they would even overdo it and add to the thing. And as long as there's laughter involved, everything is great. And finally, there are those who enjoy laughing at others. And they would actively seek and enjoy situations in which they can laugh at others at their expense. And if they would observe something that would probably only be a bit ambiguous, they would look for a way that they can use this to make others laugh at this person. They are rather cold-hearted and think, well, if someone doesn't like to be laughed at, they just should fight back, and if they can't, then, well, that's their problem. We can show, for example, that Katagelasticists is related to bullying types of behaviors. We have data for adolescents, and this is not only in self-reports, but also in ratings by their classmates. And we also have data from 6 to 9-year-olds, for example, where we also can already see this pattern. And this is also not only visible in the self-reports of the very young kids, but also in their teacher ratings, for example. So fearing to be laughed at, enjoying to be laughed at, and enjoying to laugh at others are three personality traits that help explaining how people behave in situations in which laughter and ridicule is involved. This is usually measured with the Foficart 45 self-report questionnaire. You have some sample items here that, yeah, I will not go through all of them, but if you just skim through them quickly, then you will see these fit the short descriptions I gave earlier. And basically the task is to describe yourself based on these questions, and then we score them and get a position on a dimension from low to high gelotophobia and gelotophilia and Katagelasticists for every person that does our questionnaire. In this presentation, I will focus on romantic relationships, and based on the data, there's some things that are already known. So, for example, there seems to be something like assortative preferences, for example. So partners seem to look for similarities. So the gelotophobic person is looking for a gelotophobic partner and so on. There's also some similarity between parents and their adult children. By and large, that's for the same category or type or disposition, but there are also some cross-gender effects. So for example, in this study here, we found that those daughters that have gelotophilic fathers also tend to be more on the gelotophilic side and more on the Katagelasticists side, while the expressions in the mother are comparatively less important, and so on. So there are some cross-gender effects here. There are also some similarities between parents and their young children, 6 to 9-year-olds, but they are smaller than for the adult children. We also see that there are some demographic interesting findings, such as that that you find quite a lot of elderly men with higher scores in gelotophobia that report never having had a long-term relationship. And this makes you wonder, because you can imagine a situation where they are on their first date, and then their love interest or someone they want to get to know smiles at them and laughs and tries to keep the mood light and wants to signal interest by smiling and laughing. And then the gelotophobic person feels laughed at. And why should they go on a second date with someone who laughs at them? And we then wanted to see, well, what happens if we study people that have already entered a relationship? And the design we usually use for these studies is something like this here. So we currently have only data from heterosexual couples, where we test the expressions in the three dispositions in the woman, in the man, then also collect data on their relationship satisfaction. And then we can see whether, for example, gelotophobia in the women correlates with their relationship satisfaction. But we can also see whether, say, gelotophobia in the men is associated with relationship satisfaction in their female partners. And any of the combinations is then possible. And the advantage of this design is that we can cross-examine these relationships. And we are also interested in not only testing whether, let's say gelotophobia relates to relationship satisfaction, but we are also interested in looking at the broader configurations. So looking at the whole profile. So partner A is high in gelotophobia, low in gelotophilia, and in the mid-range of Katagelasticists. If their partner has a similar configuration, are they higher or lower in relationship satisfaction, or is the similarity in the profile, so all three taken together, of less importance? And I want to show you some data from one of the studies we conducted using a sample of 154 heterosexual romantic couples in their late 20s. They were about 6 years together on average, but some also for longer, more than 30 years. And they also both completed questionnaires for the three dispositions and a relationship questionnaire where we can assess then their satisfaction with the togetherness, tenderness, whether they experience lots of disagreement, and their overall happiness. And what we see is that by and large, gelotophobia relates to negative expressions in relationship satisfaction. And that's for men and women. But we also see that the gelotophobia expression in the partner relates to lower scores in overall happiness in the relationship, also for both men and women. So the score of the partner, or the expression in the fear of being laughed at, dampens the relationship satisfaction or happiness in the relationship for both partners. For gelotophilia, we find a reverse pattern, mainly that there is a positive relationship with the feeling of tenderness, and in the women also for togetherness. And we also found that, for example, if the woman in the relationship is high in gelotophilia, their male partners experience greater satisfaction with the togetherness in the relationship. So this is one example where the partner score is very important for the relationship of the other person. For Katagelasticists, we find not really a strong pattern here, but we can see that both those higher in Katagelasticists experience greater levels of disagreement in the relationship. That's a very strong effect here. And this is for the self-ratings in Katagelasticists, but also for the ratings of the partner. So if your partner is higher in Katagelasticists, you experience yourself greater disagreement in the relationship. For the profile analysis, we can have different indicators of the similarity of the profile. So we can just look at the difference score, for example. We can look at the raw or overall profile similarity, and this the normative profile is this. And the problem there is that effects of stereotype ratings could enter these scores. So for example, ratings of a typical male or of a typical female. And to control for these effects, we also computed so-called distinctive profile similarities. There's a discussion in the literature on which of these similarity or scores is the best indicator of profile similarity. I will present all three and we can discuss the differences. Overall, there is a similar profile among our participants. So not only the single expressions in the three dispositions are similar, but also the profiles in general. And we find that even if we control for any stereotypical rating of a typical man, of a typical woman, of a typical person in this age, and so on, we find that there is still a quite robust overlap in the profiles. So the people are quite similar. And we can also show, oh, time is up, I see. Tracy, I'm sorry, I need another minute, but I will be very quick. We can see that this has an effect on the happiness in the way that when the partners are very dissimilar in gelotophobia, the perceived happiness in the relationship is smaller. We also find that the greater similarity in the profile is associated with greater relationship satisfaction. So a recommendation would be find someone who is not only similar in one of the three dispositions, but you should look for someone who is similar in all of the three dispositions. Overall, gelotophobia relates to negative relationship satisfaction, gelotophilia to positive relationship satisfaction. Katagelasticists is characterized by the perception of greater disagreement in the relationship. We found that the similarity of the profile is another thing to take into account, seems to be quite important, could inform how counseling works for couples, and overall finding from other studies is that people look for similarity in a partner. And this seems to be a good decision in the sense that this relates to greater happiness and satisfaction in the relationship. At the beginning, I told you we only have data from heterosexual couples. We would be very happy to have an extension to same-sex relationships. I don't think that there will be much difference, but I'm not aware of any data who has looked at this. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.